Alright, you know the deal. Just because something comes in last doesn't make it inherently a bad weapon, just means it has the least amount of use. Armored Core 6 is an impressively balanced game in that regard. Not so much in other departments, but this video isn't a Zimmerman diss track, so I'll just move on. Number 12, the Stun Baton. I love this weapon as a concept because I always mained Enforcer and Risk of Rain, and I think LARPing as a barricade from Transformers is a nice, healthy way to pass time. The Stun Baton has a 6-hit combo that wouldn't matter more or less if it were 37 hits, because if the first one misses, you might as well just start over. If I knew being in the middle of a combo gave you the turning radius of a camper van, then I just would've used something else. This means you'll almost always be using it only for its charged attack, making you extremely predictable in a PvP setting and completely reliant on status buildup in PvE. At that point, I'd rather just take out the needle or my akimbo tasers. Electricity isn't the worst status build you can have, since it's basically just madness with a couple extra steps, and I won't deny its efficiency against coral bosses like the Sea Spider and the Cell 240, but this is a tool that was designed for a specific purpose, pretty much cementing its obsolescence when compared to other weapons that are just more flexible. Number 11, the Laser Slicer. Theoretically, the highest damage of any weapon, but that stops being impressive when it has no window to cancel the double feature-length attack animation and can't stagger a fucking fruit fly. No, but when Rusty hits you with it, you might as well just take the time to heat up some leftovers until he finally gives you back your controller, and fuck's sake. Fortunately, this translates over to PvP exactly as well as you think it does, which I guess earns it a little bit of slack in that department, but this is a PvE video, so shut my mouth, I guess. It's hands down one of the funnest weapons to take into any fight, and it's honestly a shame it can't pull more weight in single player, because that just means most people aren't actually going to think this weapon has some benefits until 5 months later when everyone eventually migrates over to the Sweaties territory. Number 10, Moonlight. The Moonlight sword across FromSoft's history I'm pretty sure has been on every single rung of the power ladder, but I can't think of a single game where it actually ended up being deserving of such legendary merit. It's anywhere from remarkably good to somewhat passable all the way down to 6-month-old mayonnaise rotten. And I guess this is where that trend is going to continue. Even though Redshift ends up being consistently stronger, the energy damage on Moonlight's charged attack outpaces Redshift by a good several hundred, and I'm willing to give it points for that, but when it's the proud owner of the second worst cooling rate of any melee weapon, the idea of getting anything out of the standard 2-hit slash is just kinda silly. The single way you would ever be able to make this weapon work is to place it in a build with a heavy focus on ACS damage, and then pull out the charge swipe when your target is busy picking its legs up off the ground. Number 9, the Oscillator. This weapon is heartbreakingly mediocre. I tried so hard to like this weapon, I promise. I really did. I convinced myself that I was just bad until I realized plenty of other people had complaints that all but mirrored my own. Just right out of the gate, it doesn't matter how impressive the damage is on the Oscillator, because having the single worst cooldown out of any melee weapon in the game isn't something you just look at and think, I can play around that. The EN load is also annoying to build around, which is the case for most other coral weapons, but those are sacrifices I'm willing to make for a weapon like the Redshift sword, or the weird missile launcher thing that looks like someone left a boat propeller on top of a fridge. The weapon by itself is, honestly, it's fine. I like using it, but the single vertical swipe combined with the abysmally high cooldown time just makes me feel like I'm missing out on a better build, like twin boat propellers, for example. The wind-up time is just barely longer than I feel like it probably should be, and the charged attack can just be hard countered by the ancient martial practice of fucking jumping. Number 8, the Chainsaw. Yep, here it is, fellas, the most misunderstood melee weapon in the whole game. Don't get me wrong, it's still ass, but it's not, like, irredeemable or anything. It's a weapon I respect enough to not put in the trash bin, but it's still something I end up leaving on my desk for years, only acknowledging its existence when I accidentally knock it over and put a hole in my floor. The Chainsaw has an uncharged attack that I think is just so incorrigibly devoid of any merit or utility that it's the single reason why some people just assume it's the worst melee option in the game. But it can actually be left in a charging state indefinitely, and can even be used as a shield to mitigate incoming damage. This is important because the only chance you have at landing this that doesn't involve ACS breaks is if the other person accidentally unplugs their keyboard. Once I figured this out, it got exponentially more fun out-tanking other AC bosses and letting them wear themselves out before pounding them with a heavy back-busting missile and then turning them into ribbons of tiny metal confetti. Number 7, the Laser Blade. I don't even think it knows what its hitbox is. Being on a slightly different elevation and then whoever you're swinging at just flings you over their head most of the time. But with certain boosters, it does have a pretty nice dash speed. The cooling isn't great, but then again, nothing about it particularly is. Everything about the laser blade is just underrated enough for me to feel justified putting it in the exact middle spot of the list, yet giving it any more praise than it's just worth a try every now and then feels disingenuous. The charged attack is a 2-hit sweep that deals a total of 3,260 damage if both hits connect, but it's not nearly as efficient as getting rid of pulse armor, which becomes a pretty huge selling point for weapons later in the game. It's likely the second melee weapon you'll find and get attached to for half of your first playthrough, so it has a bit of sentimental value that I can't deny even grabbed me a little bit when it was finally time for me to try out better weapons. I have no idea how this fares in PvP, but the game is barely 3 weeks old. It's not like this list is taking most of that into account anyways. Come to think of it, I actually don't know if I've seen a single build take this into PvP. And there's probably a good reason for that. Number 6, Redshift. Redshift still has a couple more advantages over the Moonlight Sword despite its charged attack actually being weaker. It has a slightly higher direct hit adjustment and more impact damage per swipe, leading to it contributing more to ACS break. The extra attack power makes it somewhat comparable to the Pulse Blade that your AC starts with, and although it still comes up short just a bit in raw damage comparison, that little bit of reach gives it a lot of extra application in situations where closing in would be considered risky. Other than that, most of the weapon stats are the exact same as Moonlight, so if you weren't a huge fan of the cooling rate, then it might be time to just switch back to old reliable. Which is what's very next on the list, actually. Number 5, the Pulse Blade, sometimes referred to by its alternative title, the Butt Blade, by me. And now by you. This is the starting blade your AC is equipped with by default, and as expected, most of the weapon stats fall somewhere in the middle of the pool. The cooling rate is 282, only 1,800 pounds, the EN investment is pretty friendly. The only stat that really sticks out as more proficient than it probably should be is the weapon damage itself. 963 damage in a 2-hit combo gives it more attack and impact damage at close range than both Redshift and Moonlight. Additionally, it being a pulse blade means it's good at countering pulse armor, and charged attacks can almost climb to 1,600 damage per swing. Honestly, the amount of utility in a starter weapon the game gives to you for free is pretty astounding. The ACS damage is nothing incredible, and the cooling rate can still be annoying to deal with in high pressure situations, but you could easily run through the game with this as your main melee and not even stop to look at other selections. Number 4, the Laser Dagger. This dagger has the quickest cooling rate of any weapon at just over 1,300. No idea the amount of time that actually translates to, but it's just about free to use again immediately after pulling it out, so I'm guessing it's pretty fast. 750 damage on a weapon that can score up to 3 hits is some Looney Tunes shit. It's extremely lightweight, which leads to a lot of people tossing it on high mobility ACs, but it tends to perform just as well in stance breaker builds, because landing a full combo on someone who's recovering from getting back blasted does some of the meanest damage you will ever see in this game. It's still a dagger, so you're obviously gonna want to close in on something instead of trying to land a lunging hit like you're shooting from half court, but if you're a fan of daggers, lightweight builds, and killing bosses before the dialogue sequence can even wrap up properly, then consider this a personal recommendation. Number 3, the Plasma Mine Launcher. I love how few people use this weapon both off and online, and how surprised they get when they realize it's not just competent, it fucking shreds. 1,300 plus damage on a melee weapon with this amount of range and this quick of a recovery makes this one of the only weapons you'd ever need. And the fact that it's so lightweight and has an unexpectedly low EN demand means you can shove this intergalactic toaster into practically any build you want and it'll still kinda make sense. Charging the weapon makes you spin it in front of yourself like a kid lighting a firework for the first time, which can actually be used as a sort of pseudo shield that deflects bullets and can be charged indefinitely while you're busy using other weapons to bust your enemy's kneecaps open and create a window for the mine spread, because Lord knows standing completely still is the only way to actually get hit by it. The mines are actually really consistent regarding the area spread, as there is a very particular range the radius of the mines will have, and if you're anywhere outside of the range of I think 80 to 120 meters, the mines will almost always completely miss. This makes it one of the only melee weapons that's actually more suitable in medium range builds. You're not gonna break anyone's spine with this, but it might be the best melee weapon for playstyles that involve getting in, poking something, and getting out. Number 2, the Laser Lance. Fuck's sake, this is the daggers video all over again. Wonder what the first one's gonna be. Snail must have put in some real effort to make this thing look like shit. No idea why he almost never uses it in any of his fights, but he does seem like the type to take shits on another pilot for packing double songbirds, so maybe carrying around a 4,000 pound laser pointer was a flex in his generation or something. fucking fossil. So anyways, yeah, laser lance. Coupling this with any explosive launcher or stance-breaking weapon of any kind, and you can pretty much immobilize whatever AC you want in the game. It is stupid how good this shit is at breaking people's ankles. I can't imagine it faring too well in PvP because long wind-up times and easily telegraphed movements are two of the most debilitating things an attack can have against other players, but a little bit of forethought in between dodges and you can land this on the slickest and slipperiest of shitheads. Just make sure you don't miss and fling yourself into the next county over, because while you're busy trying to figure out which direction you're facing, whoever you tried to rush now gets a free opportunity to spread your iron ass cheeks wide open like they're dressing a sandwich. Armored Core 6 Patch Notes Summary 1.03. Attack power and impact of Pile Bunker has been decreased. Animation speed of the charged attack is now slightly slower. Players are more prone to ACS strains when advancing from a distance. And switching left-hand weapons now comes with a small delay that prevents attacking for half a second. Come back in 5 patches when someone reminds us to give a shit after we've spent 3 months buffing the fucking handguns. Ever wonder what the stake driver would have been like if it was actually good at closing distance and the charged heavy didn't have a wind-up long enough to come with its own monologue? Look no further! Hope you fuckers enjoy it, because when it comes time for the balancing team to make an example out of something, there couldn't be a more obvious candidate. It's gonna be either this or nerfing Balteus. Maybe both. Maybe they'll surprise me. The ludicrous amount of damage supplied by the charged attack would have been enough of a selling point, but most of the melee weapons come with this little advance to compensate for the quicker mobility of your enemies. The impact of the Pile Bunker is 1150, but the charged attack can climb up all the way to 1800. So if you point this thing at someone and their kneecaps don't just explode on impact, then you've done something wrong. You're using it wrong.